Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
Witches of Bailey by Paris Michaels. My name is Paige Brumley. I'm going to tell you the story of how I died. First, you should know how I lived. I'm 30 and really awkward. I don't like being so awkward, but I am. I remember high school all too clearly, and how everyone avoided me. I guess they were afraid they were going to catch the weird, quiet girl from me. It was difficult to get through the 4 years of high school without any friends, but I managed. I graduated top of my class, went to university, and became a pediatrician. I hadn't long been a doctor when I met Emma Jane. Emma became my very best friend. At last, in my adult life, I found a true friend. We happened upon one another in the strangest of events. I was leaving a convention that taught us all about this new wonderful treatment for children with insomnia and night terrors. This sounded promising. I was sent to the convention in place of the senior doctor at our office, Max Bones. He didn't have time for such trivial matters as conventions, when he could send me. Max knew I would return with all the information regarding the treatment. Then he would look into it and decide if it was fit for our office. Oh, back to how I met Emma. Well, I was leaving the hotel at last, and I saw a woman that looked to be my age walking around the parking lot, lost. She was pretty in her white dress. She had ash blonde hair that was just above the shoulder. I couldn't help but notice she seemed scared and out of place. I approached her and asked if she needed some help finding her car. "No, I don't own a car, but thank you," Emma said with a faint smile. But there was a look of confusion in her eyes. "Well, can I drop you somewhere?" I prodded. "Really? That would be great. I don't want to impose on you, though." "It's no trouble, really. What's the address?" I asked. 1982 Cromwell, she said. I led her to my car and plugged the address into my GPS. She sat in the passenger seat, looking at the buttons and lights that lit up along the dash. Emma had a look of genuine awe on her face. I was a bit perplexed, but I wasn't going to say anything about it. I hadn't noticed immediately that my GPS wasn't registering that address. I asked if that was correct. She said that it was. And then I asked her if she was in this town. To my shock, she asked what town we were in. I told her we were in Winston. It was her turn to look shocked. "No, I live in Bailey." I re-entered the address for Bailey. This time a route popped up. I felt sorry for Emma. She seemed to be suffering from some type of amnesia. I asked her how she ended up so far from home. It was 100-mile drive. And coincidentally, I too live in Bailey. Emma looked at me, her mouth slightly agape. She shrugged one shoulder and told me she had attended a party the night before. She explained that she woke up in a park and just started walking. I felt I knew what had happened. She had been slipped a roofie. I couldn't think of another reason for this woman to be so far from home and wandering the streets aimlessly. "My name is Paige, by the way," I said, trying not to act how I felt, and that was sorry for her situation and highly concerned. "Oh, I'm Emma. Pleased to meet you." "Likewise," I said with a genuine smile. "Well, off to Bailey we go. I'm glad we live in the same town. Makes things easier as far as getting you home," I said to Emma. She was staring out the window, watching trees fly past on the highway. She didn't respond. I could only imagine what the poor woman had been through. And what's worse is she'd probably had no memory of it. I couldn't help myself. As a doctor, I have an oath to upkeep. I asked her if she could remember anything from the previous night. She told me no. Then I asked her if she had any marks on her body that would indicate any malicious acts. This time she looked at me, then looked at both arms and down at her legs. Emma said she didn't see any bruises or scratches. I didn't fully believe her. I asked her if she'd let me check her out at the clinic, but she adamantly said no. I didn't like that, but I couldn't force her. The drive back to Bailey was now one in silence. Again, I felt that sense of being awkward, but I had to ask her those things. I couldn't have lived with myself if I hadn't. Finally, we arrived at her address. The house was old. I took in the 2-story dark Gothic-style home. It had some paint flaking off of it, but it was beautiful and haunting, with its steep and high-pitched roof, with elaborate trim work on the outside. It looked empty and lonely. The yard was overgrown, and there were no lights on. I asked her if she needed help getting inside, and she shook her head no, then got out of the car after fumbling with the door handle. "Thank you, Paige. It feels good to be home," Emma said. "You're welcome. Do you live alone?" "Yeah, this place gets to be a little big for me sometimes. But my parents left it to me and it's paid for, so I deal with it being too much at times," Emma said with a hint of sadness. "Here, take this. If you need anything or just want somebody to visit with, give me a call. I live alone too, and friends are in short supply." I immediately regretted saying the last part as I handed her my card. It made me feel pathetic. "Tell me about it," Emma said with a real smile this time. "Maybe we could do lunch one day soon." "You are my savior," Emma said. I didn't feel so pathetic at her bright response, which was in stark contrast to the home she was about to enter. "I would really like that. Just call the cell number I wrote on the back." I had finally made a friend. Maybe. I hoped anyway. So that's how Emma and I met. Strange, maybe to some people, having met under stranger circumstances. At least she didn't make me feel awkward. In her own way, Emma was awkward too. Emma called me a week later on a Saturday. I was glad to hear from her. I'd been so busy with work. Dr. Max Bones was intrigued by the information I had brought back from the convention. He seemed to be genuinely interested in the new treatment for insomnia and night terrors in children. The cutting-edge procedure didn't require doping little kids and teens with sleep aids and the like. I hadn't had much time to think about the bizarre encounter with Emma. However, I thought about it now as I drove back to the address where I had left her. I thought about how she lived in a sprawling home by herself and how she had ended up 100 miles from her home. It was more unsettling when thinking about it on second thought. I tried to push the thought away of what had most likely happened to her as I pulled into the drive of this elaborate and ornate home. Emma wasn't outside waiting on the grand wraparound porch, so I got out of my car and approached the house. I walked attentively up the stairs of the enormous porch. There was a door knocker. A dragon or serpent of some sort held the ring between its teeth. I used the knocker and rapped 3 times. I didn't know how many times to use the door knocker. What was the appropriate etiquette for such an old tradition? Emma opened the door after a minute and invited me in. I was surprised at how cozy this massive abode was. The rooms were bigger than my whole apartment. It was furnished in 19th century decor. I asked her if her parents had been fond of the Gothic era. Emma shrugged her shoulders with a half smile. "Yeah, they were, I suppose," she said in a small voice. "They seem to have attained an amazing collection," I stated as I looked around the parlor, with the massive fireplace that was roaring with a bright fire that looked as if it could jump out and lick the hearth. "Tea?" Emma asked as she gestured towards the sofa. It was a deep emerald color, with wooden trim framing the piece of furniture. Yes, thank you," I said as I took a seat on the hard sofa. Emma bustled herself, making us hot teas. Mine an Earl Grey with 2 sugars and milk. Against the blistering cold outside, this was a welcome change. We talked about my work and her parents. She didn't seem to have too much to talk about. I inquired about boyfriends or prospects. She rubbed her hands on her thighs. The old-fashioned white dress clung to. I couldn't help but notice it was very similar to the dress she had been wearing when we met, except this dress had much more embroidery on it. No men in my life. I think they complicate everything. What about you?" "Me?" I asked incredulously. Then I laughed. "No, same here. Too complicated," I lied as I sipped my tea. Men weren't too anything for me. I just ran from them. I found myself feeling too intimidated by the opposite sex. Emma seemed so flawless it was hard to imagine her not wanting or having a boyfriend or husband. Everyone is different, I thought to myself. Our chat flowed easily. It was as if we'd known one another forever. We didn't go out on the town, we just stayed in the cozy house and talked. She did give me the grand tour of her home. To call this place a house would have been an understatement. It was certainly a mansion. Emma took me from the parlor, and she glided into the foyer effortlessly. She was so graceful. I felt so clumsy compared to her. We began the tour by climbing the grand staircase. The inside wasn't run down at all compared to the outside, which needed a little TLC. Inside of Emma's home was beyond anything I'd ever seen. The staircase was made of dark mahogany wood. Intricate designs of a sharp nature were carved along the entire banister. The staircase was made of dark mahogany wood. Intricate designs of a sharp nature were carved along the entire banister. The stairs themselves were covered in a black carpet runner. When we reached the top, I looked down into the grand foyer. The floor was more impressive from this height. From here you could see the stone masonry of the floor was superb. I was staring at the glory of the floor of all things. Within the stone, there were sigils marking the top of each stone that had been laid to make this work of art. It wasn't entirely impressive on its own when I had first entered the house. But from this bird's-eye view, though, the floor, the polished stones and their sigils seemed to mean something. Emma watched me with a twinkle in her eye and a smile on her near-perfect mouth. Why did she have to be so perfect? She led me down the hallway that had statues behind every doorway. Each one was grotesque in some way, not beautiful and breathtaking like what I'd seen thus far. Emma noticed my change in demeanor as it went from awe to, what the hell? She stood beside me and placed her hand on the first statue. Touching the cheek of the stone monster, she looked upon this gargoyle with adoration. "Can't you see the beauty behind the face?" Emma asked me. I didn't know what to say. I stood in silence looking at the thing, then peering down the hall to see 9 more. They were all different. They were all various in height and facial features. Some had wings, some did not. Some had cloven hooves, as others stood on human appendages. "Not really," I said in a whisper. Emma took her hand away from the statue cheek and touched my own. "You will, though. You'll see the beauty in all things. Paige, you do not yet see the beauty within yourself. That is why all you can see is the disfigurement of these guardians. Once you're able to look upon yourself with adoration, you will then see the abundance of loveliness within these grotesqueries. You will see their true nature, They are my protectors. They were built with the utmost love, care, and tenderness. Not all things are as they appear on the outside. You will see. Emma had said more in that statement than I had yet to hear her speak. I looked down the hall and back to the ugly little monsters in front of me. I just nodded in agreement and said something like, "Oh, I hope you're right about all that." I had no idea what she was going on about. I liked myself well enough. That was all I ever needed, was well enough. Now I felt more self-conscious than ever. Oh well, we were done with this hall and heading up one more flight of stairs. Honestly, from the outside, this place had looked to only have 2 levels. As we reached the end of the immaculate hall and began ascending the next flight of stairs, I couldn't help but notice a shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't something I was familiar with. It was as if the air grew heavy, and I felt an unease in my stomach. I suppose most people would say that it was their gut instinct. In my case, I was far too curious to see what lay ahead to stop. I mean, it was Emma after all, so I ignored the shift in the atmosphere. The stairs weren't grand like the first flight had brought us to the second floor. No, these were narrow, and the wood looked to be oak, maybe? I don't know my wood that well. As I walked behind Emma in silence, I contemplated how far these steps went. They seemed to never end. There was a wall on either side of us, and every 10 steps or so there would be a picture of what I assumed were relatives of long ago. They were sepia photos of women, men, children, all in white. It took me a few pictures to realize that every photograph the person was donned in white attire, much like how Emma was dressed. The feeling of uneasiness set in stronger. "How much further?" I asked, winded, not able to totally shut out my gut feeling. "Oh, not much further. I want to show you the best part of the house." "I'm sorry it's such a climb to get there," Emma answered apologetically. I nodded, afraid to talk again and lose any more breath. It was so cold up here. I thought heat rose, no? I knew that heat rose. So why in the bloody hell did it feel like a deep freeze up here? She must not have heat in this part of the house, I thought. A couple of minutes later, we reached a door. Emma took an old key from a chain that dangled around her neck on a chain. She inserted it into the lock. I could hear the tumblers clicking to allow us entry. As I walked in behind her, I was taken aback more than I have ever done in my entire life. What I saw in front of me could only exist in books, right? I looked around the room, made entirely of glass. The walls, the ceiling, the floor even. I didn't cross the threshold completely. I had one foot on the glass and one on the safety of the wooden floor. Emma assured me that this glass was no less than 3 feet thick, and it wasn't normal glass. She explained it was imported from a distant place overseas. She couldn't recall the country, but her parents had gone to great lengths to ensure the safety of this installment to their home. Roses as red as blood were in full bloom, climbing the height of the walls, which were easily 20 feet. The ceiling was glass and cathedral style, letting the moon shine in. There were chrysanthemums as glorious as any I'd ever seen. Ivy scaled the walls beside the roses. There were flowers I didn't know the name of. In one area of the room was orchids, the blooms bigger than my head. Lilies danced along the water of an artificial pond that had a small waterfall. Koi swam beneath the surface. Lavender and herbs of all genus were growing in rows along the long, wide wooden tables. I felt I'd just walked into a piece of heaven. The tranquility was intoxicating. I began to feel heady, as if I might float out of the ceiling that just showed snowflakes falling from the night sky. How could a paradise like this exist in someone's home? I watched Emma walk among the plant life, gently talking to her flowers as if they were her children. Only when she could feel my stare did she look up at me with a rose cupped gently in her palm. Paige, this is my paradise. The pride of my home. The pride of my life, really. I haven't shown it to another soul until now. Emma smiled at me, her perfect teeth glistening white. How did you get so far from home? I heard myself say the word before I had to be tactful. I told you. I was at a party here in town. Then I woke up there. I don't know how I arrived there. Emma sounded a bit bitter at the sudden intrusion of my question. I couldn't help myself, though. It was like word vomit. Did you ever go see a doctor? No. Why? Does it matter? It matters because you could have been drugged, and that sounds like what happened to you. I said the words hotly while my eyes locked with Emma. I understand your concern. However, I assure you I am well. I'm better now than I have ever been. Emma said this last statement lightly and matter of fact. Given the topic was regarding her popping up like a weed in a city 100 miles from home, under unknown circumstances, she sounded as if unfazed by it. This is so lovely. It's almost too lovely. It doesn't feel real. Again, word vomit. What the hell was wrong with me? Oh, I assure you it is real. It is real as you and me, Emma said, beaming. She looked radiant for the first time since meeting her. Emma looked in place in this room, among the plant life. She looked alive, truly alive. She smiled as she looked at her flowers and herbs. I didn't understand why here, in this glass room of greens, blues, reds, and every other color you can imagine, she looked so different. I suppose any of us would, but it wasn't a change that was subtle. Her skin glowed with life. Her face didn't appear worried, tired, or too pale. She looked like a healthy, happy person. Downstairs she looked as if she was a bit frail, a bit too small, a bit too white. Not now, though. No, now she looked as alive as if the miracle of all of this botanical bliss. I was also perplexed by why I had the sudden urge to interrogate her regarding her strange appearance in Winston, the town where I had found her. I noticed Emma watching me again, studying me, as if she could read my mind. She answered my question. Paige, the reason you are overcome with what you are thinking of as word vomit is a natural effect of the plant you are standing near. Wait, had she just read my mind? She looked at me and tilted her head slightly to the right. I'm standing next to the plant that lends me the ability to glimpse inside your head, Emma said as if this was normal. I walked quickly away from the plant that held white blooms, a plant I had never seen before. I asked her to walk away from the plant with the purple blooms that she stood by. She walked near me, and she informed me that it didn't matter how far away from these plants we were. As long as we were in this sky greenhouse, the abilities would remain with us. Taking this insane information in, I decided to try something. Could I possibly see into her mind? Find out what happened to her the week prior? Sensing my thoughts, she quickly grabbed my arm firmly and told me to not dare try to see in her mind. All at once, I didn't want to be here anymore. Emma released me gently and apologized for her small outburst, and led me to the opening of the room. We descended the long stairwell after she had locked the greenhouse opening. I felt a strong need to leave this house. Nothing felt right anymore. I'd become afraid. I think Emma could sense this, though the plants were far enough away that she couldn't peek in my head anymore. She offered an apology, stating that she thought I could have been the one with which she could have shared her secrets with. I assured her I was that person. I wanted to know everything about this woman. She was incredible and fascinating. She smiled at me warmly and lowered her head to look at the stone floor in the foyer. I was sorry to have hurt her feelings. In hindsight, she should have been sorry for springing all of this on me. I allowed myself to be sucked in, though. Sucked into the world of Emma. When I got back to my apartment later, I fell face first onto my overstuffed bed. I could still smell the sweetness and earthy smell of the sky greenhouse. That's what I had dubbed it. Thoughts of the evening were running wild in my head. Nothing made sense. How had I ended up befriending the weirdest person on Earth? There was more going on here, and I intended to find out what it was. Who was Emma? What were those strange plants? And how did she end up 100 miles from home in my hotel parking lot? This was beginning to feel far from a coincidence. I had an innate need to find the truth out about this woman's life. Armed with the last name and address, I visited the library. I felt like a cliché investigator who would have a movie montage of me going through old newspaper reels. However, I did not immediately use the old newspapers. I used the library archives of historical families, tracking the James last name back to the 19th century. The family tree wasn't massive. It had taken me a bit of time to find them, though. It seemed that the James family had moved here at the turn of the 17th century. Madeline and Joseph arrived in Bailey, which had then been known as Parapet. A town changed its name to Bailey at the end of the 19th century. So the archive noted that Madeline and Joseph James, hailing from Ireland, made a home in Parapet. They were a wealthy couple, seeking grander wealth in the growing United States. They settled in Parapet, as it was called, and built a grand estate at 1982 Cromwell. They were warmly welcomed by the townspeople, and soon Joseph found himself in a position of power as the mayor of Parapet. Madeline gave birth to twins, daughters. I kept reading with a feverish need. I didn't know why I felt more than curious, but compulsive, rather. I had to read this. I had to know everything there was to know about this family. The archive went on to say that only one twin survived. They named her Myra Emma James. Emma! My breath caught in my chest as I read the name again. It couldn't have been my Emma, so my reaction was over the top. I had spooked myself, I thought, but then I began to think of the strange flowers in her sky greenhouse that had loaned us abilities that weren't supposed to exist. This archive loaned no more information. I found my way over to the microfiche. Cue the montage. I fervently sat for what felt like hours scouring through the library records. Kudos to whoever kept all this together. They had done a fantastic job. Then finally, I found a headline reading, Mayor Joseph James dead. I read the article. It stated that he had died in his sleep. He was 34 years old. The cause of death was unknown, and the town was in a state of shock. The next article read, Wife of Mayor James denies any knowledge of her husband's early demise. Mrs. James states that we went to bed as normal. We had tucked Mira into bed together as our normal routine. I awoke for a drink of water in the wee hours of the morning. Myra was in her room playing on the floor with her blocks. I went into my child's bedroom and tucked her back in. Then going into my room, I saw Joseph's face as he lay on his back. It was a look I shall never forget. He had a look of terror frozen on his handsome face. That ended the quote from Madeline James. The article didn't offer any other details, except there was a photo of Madeline. She looked eerily like Emma. I let the tingles run up my spine and did a quick shake, as one does with a cold chill. In the next article, this was nearly a month after the first two. Headline: Madeline James to be married. I was shocked. How could she marry anyone only a month after the death of her husband? Despite my personal feelings, I continued to read the article. The people of the town were not happy that Madeline would be marrying world-renowned botanist Morgan Nielsen. He had arrived in America only 2 months before the good mayor's demise. Madeline's rushed marriage raised eyebrows, and the rumor mill had been churning out some stories regarding scandal and possible premeditated murder. The stories were unfounded because there was no evidence in the end. My day of studying up on the James family and Emma proved to be exhausting. Now I had more questions and no real answers. The botanist was certainly a curiosity, considering the sky greenhouse. Then there was Madeline, who looked eerily like Emma. And then there was Myra Emma James herself. I had a feeling that my answers would only come from Emma's house. After working the next day, I called Emma to ask if she would like some company. She said she would. So I swung by my apartment and dressed in some comfortable street clothes started my trip to 1982 Cromwell. Emma greeted me when I rapped using the giant knocker. I guess 3 times was a good amount of rapping with an old door knocker, after all. She led me into the parlor that we had sat in before. It looked exactly the same. No clutter, or proof that it had ever been sat in since I last visited. Emma had a tea tray set out for me. I had my normal Earl Grey with milk and 3 sugars. Emma looked at me with an odd twinkle in her eye. I smiled at her from behind my cup as I tried not to scald my tongue on the tea. So last time you were here, you were telling me of an innovative way of helping children with night terrors and insomnia, correct? Emma asked. Oh, yes. Dr. Bones has incorporated the new therapy, and we're waiting on the new treatment method to arrive now. The technology is quite advanced. You see, we won't have to use pills for these children afflicted with this awful condition. I realized I was rambling. How does it all work? I find this subject fascinating, Emma said, smiling. I couldn't resist talking about work, especially this matter. It really was mind-blowing. Well, you see, night terrors are caused by a plethora of issues, or just one out of the plethora. Stress is one of the most common causes. When the brain is in the deepest form of non-REM sleep, is when the terrors generally occur. Between midnight and 2 in the morning, typically. I looked at Emma for signs of boredom. She seemed genuinely interested, so I continued. So the idea is to trick the brain with one simple injection. It is made up of a tiny bit of belladonna, aka deadly nightshade, and valerian root, along with some other chemicals, one being phenobarbital. However, they have discovered that blending these 2 plants together at a certain dosage alleviates night terrors permanently. I looked at Emma for a response. Belladonna. Do you know why it's called that? Emma asked me. I tried to think back to my days in university, but I was feeling so groggy. I'd spent so much time working and digging in the library. I suppose I must have burnt the candle at both ends of the wick. I let out a yawn. I apologized to Emma for the sudden onset of tiredness. Oh, it's all right, Paige. You need your rest. Being a busy doctor and all. You are exhausted, you poor thing. I could hear Emma talking, but her words were taking time to compute in my brain. With several moments between what she said and my reply, I knew this wasn't normal exhaustion. I tried to look at Emma, but the room was growing dark in my brain's perception. In reality, my vision was leaving me. I became numb all at once, and this otherworldly exhaustion took over. I passed out on the emerald green couch. When I awoke, I could feel again. I could see again, and I was alert to my strange surroundings. I tried to sit up, but was cut short as a strap was bound across my chest. I quickly realized my arms were strapped to my side, and my feet were bound. I began screaming for Emma. The beautiful, effortlessly graceful Emma opened the door to the room and came inside. She sat in the chair next to my bed prison. What happened? Why am I strapped down? My questions were flowing like water from a tap. Paige, you're going to stay here with me. I didn't know how to tell you the great news. I was afraid you would run. Emma half laughed as she said the second sentence. Of course I would run. Why are you being a psycho? I said with my voice raised. Emma looked as if I had physically slapped her. I am not a psycho. They used to use words like that when I was a child. I'm not crazy. I know exactly what I'm doing, Paige. I have waited for you for a very long time. I didn't speak. Now was the time to keep my mouth shut. This woman was deranged. If she indeed knew what she was doing, then I knew I was epically screwed. I glared at her instead. Paige, you don't remember me because you were born during a different time than I was. We once shared a living space, though. I doubt you remember that either. The point is, I've gone to great lengths to ensure that you regain your memories of me. Emma sounded sadistically chirpy. What in the bloody hell are you rambling about? I asked through gritted teeth. I will have to show you, but first you need to know you won't run away from me again, Emma said, matter of fact. Again? I asked, with a complete lack of sanity becoming more and more frightening. Emma produced a syringe. I jerked and thrashed as much as I could, but her aim was true. She had sunk the needle into my neck. I began to feel numb again, but not tired. Within minutes I was immobile, but my mind was very much alert. Emma brought a wheelchair to the bedside. It was as ancient as everything in this house. She undid all of the straps that were binding me to the bed. She had planned this out. In my panic, I hadn't realized I was lying on a wide, flat board that she used to maneuver me into the wheelchair. Lucky for her, I wasn't much bigger than she was. Do you remember me asking earlier if you knew why Dudley Nightshade is called Belladonna? Emma asked. As a matter of fact, I did know, but I couldn't speak, so I listened to Emma. It's called that because the Renaissance women would drop the poison in their eyes to dilate the pupils. This was considered very alluring. Belladonna was coined for the plant in those times, meaning beautiful lady. Isn't that interesting? Emma asked. I couldn't speak or nod, but yes, I had always found it interesting. And I still found it more interesting that eye doctors use it to dilate the pupils even to today. Damn my brain for running off with a million thoughts. This woman could be wheeling me to my death, but I would still be thinking of damn eye drops. We seemed to be under the house. The ground was stone and it was wet. I could smell the moist earth around me. It was dark, but Emma seemed to have no trouble directing herself. I could barely see. We continued like this for a few moments until she reached a huge wooden door. Emma stepped in front of me and pushed the door with all her might. The behemoth of a door creaked open. Inside I could see a glowing light. Emma pushed me in the wheelchair towards the light. I felt panic rising, but I couldn't do anything. My heart was beating over 100 beats per minute. I knew I had to calm down. I was growing faint from my rapid heartbeat. I started to slow my breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. My mouth was hanging open, so that made it easier to breathe while paralyzed. Emma stopped abruptly. She walked in front of me, her back to me, and seemed to go into a trance. I heard her whispering, but couldn't make out the words. After a couple of minutes, I could hear her, as her voice took a normal speaking tone, then grew louder. She was saying, "Arise, sister, arise, my mother. I invoke thee to my side. Arise, my sister, arise, my mother. I invoke thee to my side." Emma chanted these words over and over. The light grew from a glow to a flash of blinding brilliance. I could see a woman step from the light. My gut felt like it was twisting into knots. It was Madeline James. Madeline reached out and took Emma's hand in hers. She smiled warmly at Emma. Then the unthinkable happened. The pair turned to face me. "Arise, my sister, I invoke thee. Arise, my sister, I invoke thee." I felt a tugging sensation within my body. It felt like I was being torn apart at the seams. The numbing agent was wearing off, and I let out a scream that sounded like that of a dying person, in the throes of the worst pain imaginable. My body felt like it was on fire. My head jerked back involuntarily, and light escaped my mouth, shooting straight into the ceiling and enveloping the cavernous room with light. My body went lax all of a sudden, and with the last firing synapses, my eyes could see my soul walking to join the two women. I looked at my dead flesh bag sitting in the wheelchair. I didn't have time to take the scene in completely before my new mind was filled with memories. I was bursting forth into the light only to die. Then I was floating above the blonde girl. She was playing with blocks in her room. It was dark. Our mother came into the room and told Myra to go back to bed. Little Myra told her mom that she had only been playing with her sister. Madeline, our mother, looked at Myra with tears welling in her eyes. She tucked the little girl back into bed. Then, as I was watching Myra try to sleep, I heard Madeline scream. My mind could see her standing over the dead body of Joseph James, my father. He was dead. My memories quickly changed again. This time I was hovering over a man I didn't know. He was dropping something into my father's drink. Wait, this was earlier in the day. It was Morgan Nielsen, the famous botanist. He had poisoned my father. My memories rapidly sped up. I was standing beside Myra, but she couldn't see me. She could feel me, though. She turned her little head to face me. I smiled and realized we were the same height. I was only 4, I realized. We were at a wedding. I looked at the bride. It was Madeline, my mother, and she was marrying my father's killer. I tried to scream to Madeline and tell her what he had done. She couldn't hear me. Myra heard me, though. Myra grabbed her mother's hand and began to tell her that he had killed Father. Madeline didn't believe her, and she scolded her daughter for trying to ruin her wedding day. Myra told me that it was me, her sister, that had seen it. This landed Myra a large punishment. She was left in her room for a full 2 weeks with meals but nothing else. Morgan Nielsen had demanded the severe punishment against Madeline's wishes. My memories then began to flash forward at warp speed. I could see that Morgan eventually poisoned Madeline in the same manner as he had Joseph, my father. Then I could see him imposing himself on Myra. She tried to fight him, but she lost. She was wearing the white dress I had seen her during the conference in Winston. The first day I met her, when she had looked so lost and confused. Everything snapped back to my new reality. "What is happening?" I asked through sobs that shook my new body. It was Emma who answered. "Paige Allison James. That's your name. That is the name that is carved on your headstone, as Myra Emma James is carved on mine." Emma looked at me with great sympathy in her eyes. "You died right after birth, sister, but you never left me. Not until Morgan killed me and dumped my body 100 miles from my home." "Wait, so how did I have another life? How did I become flesh if I had already been born then died?" It was Madeline's turn to speak. "After I had to bury my precious baby, I became obsessed with ways to bring you back. Life wasn't full without you. Half of my heart was buried with you. I began making changes to the house. The sigils on the floor in the foyer are life-giving marks from witches of old. The glass room of plants, it is one of life. Precious life resides in the greenhouse. I began to grow every manner of plants and herbs. Little did I realize I had accidentally infused 2 of those plants with a sentient nature." Madeline took a look upward and then back to me and continued. "The 2 plants which Myra told you can read minds and force the truth from a person are products of my great love for my daughters. I was gifted those plants in the event that Myra ever found you. One would turn white and the other purple." "So, you are my mother and you are my sister?" I asked in barely a whisper. The 2 women nodded. "Okay, so here I am in all my ghostly glory. What in the hell do you want with me?" I sputtered out. "We need you. We love you. And we can't enter the realm of hell without 3 witches," Emma said. "Wait, what? Hell? What do you mean, hell? Why would I ever want to go to hell?" I asked aghast. "Daughter, it's not only that we need you for this trip into the darkness. We love you. We have only met you once before, and it was for mere seconds. This is our second attempt to bring you back to us, and it has worked. I have the twins that prophecy foretold of." "What is with the witches and prophecy? When I did my research on the family, it didn't say anything about witches," I said. Emma, or Myra, began to laugh brightly. I'd never seen her laugh before. "Dear Paige, do you think we would allow our heritage to be leaked into the realms of mere humans?" "No, I suppose not." I felt excited and defeated all at once. "Okay, well, why are we going into hell?" I asked. "To kill Morgan, of course. Oh, I know his body is dead, and his soul is in hell. However, I want to wipe his soul from existence," my new mom said. I suppose I should get used to calling her Mom. "No wonder I've always been an overachiever," I said faintly, looking at the stone floor, picturing hell. "I know you have so many questions. and we have all the answers. First, though, we need to find new bodies, Mira said. I was also going to have to pick. Either call her Emma or Myra. I would ask her preference later. So, that's the story of how I died. I'm rocking a hot new bod now, though. No, we didn't kill anyone for these bodies. It had to do with a morgue and some ritual. I'm finding that inner beauty that Myra talked about to me, about in front of those ugly gargoyles. My sister pretty much kicks ass. And so does Madeline, Mom. We leave for hell in a few short days, when the moon is right. It is still hard for me to believe that my dad, Joseph, never knew my mom had a thick heritage of witches in her family. I wish I hadn't taken my first death to bring it out in her. I say first death since they tried this ritual to bring me back once before and it failed. So I guess when I die again, it will be my third. Anyway, before we leave, I have to make some calls and ensure that the treatment for night terrors is not used in my old office and that it's taken off the market. Apparently Morgan Nilsson was able to cook up some sort of remedy for children's night terrors. Although the concoction won't kill the kids, it does have very bad side effects, or so I'm told. Mom apparently has a spy in hell. I hope she has one in heaven, too. So quoth this raven. This was the prequel to Witches of Bailey series. There is a book coming out in the spring to Hell and Back that is the continuation of this. I will keep you updated on this if I find out what's going on. Thank you all so much for coming to listen to me in my chateau. It means so much to me. And special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Ermin, Darren and Jennifer, Laura, and Charlotte Emerson. Joseph never knew that my mom had a thick heritage of witches in her family.
Yeah, the cat won't let me record. Rah!
If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.